Hey, Wade.
Good morning, Rob. How's
Hey,
life treating you today?
it's doing great. I'm really excited because you know what, bro? The amazing guests keep coming and coming. And this season, season 4 of Magic.tv, The Modern Magicians, has not failed to impress. We've had magicians of old come back, like Mon Duquette, and we've had some amazing talents like Dr. Sledge and Marcus Matern come in to show us what they have to offer and show us the power that the modern magicians apply through social media, through YouTube, and how we reach a wider audience and open more minds. And today, bro, I am stoked. You know why?
Tell me why.
We got none other than Dr. Angela Puca joining us. She gave time to us out of her busy schedule. She's a published author, educator, PhD. I mean, you know you're a badass when you got a PhD attached to your name. So, like, shout out to all the PhD occult magic practitioners out there. You are people I aspire to be. But without any further ado, I want to hear what this lovely lady has to say. Welcome to Magic.tv, Dr. Angela Puca.
Thank you so much for inviting me. And yeah, it's exciting to be here.
The honor's all ours, ma'am. So before we go any further, since it's your first time here, we want to know more about you. I mean, you have made some epic contributions, especially on YouTube, to this basic education. Nowadays, education is not just in the classroom. A lot of people go to YouTube to learn things, and your content has been just drooling, for lack of a better word, because it's like, wow, the things you talk about, the practical, the historic, it's such an inspiration. So we want to know more. How did you get started in this journey that eventually would become a PhD, an expert of occultism? We want to hear all about you.
So I'd say that I've always been interested in esotericism ever since I was a child. For personal reasons and also because I think even from a theoretical point of view, because I took philosophy as my major in university. So I've always been fascinated by the meaning of things, why people do things, what is the meaning of our life, and all the questions about consciousness and all the big questions in life. I felt like it wasn't really worth for me to live in a world where I wouldn't try and understand how it worked and the meaning of things around me. And to me, magic is part of that, because if you're trying to understand the meaning of things and the meaning of everything, obviously you would want to, well, not obviously, I suppose that not for everybody is the same, but in my case it drew me towards occult studies and esotericism, because it felt to me as though the esoteric side of reality is something that is also worth studying. Like, if you want to understand reality, you want to understand what is in the light in front of you and visible, and also what is in the darkness, what is present but is not obvious to your eyes. And if anything, it could be even more interesting, because perhaps what is in the shadows can be a much a much stronger driver for things like the meaning of our own lives. So I think these philosophical questions have led me towards esotericism. And then at university, I studied philosophy, and in Italy, there isn't really a religious studies program. I think now they're starting to have something similar in Rome and in other places, but it's not common. So people that are interested in religions tend to do philosophy, so that you can study philosophy and then you can add exams also in the history of different religions. So I studied philosophy, both Eastern and Western philosophies. I learned Sanskrit and Tibetan, and I wasn't really aware that you could study magic from an academic point of view, especially contemporary esotericism from an academic point of view. I was aware that in Italy there were studies about medieval witch hunts at the Middle Ages in relation to witchcraft, the Renaissance. So I was aware of studies like that on Giordano Bruno, Marsilio Ficino, and so on, but not about the contemporary world. So at the time, I was leaning more towards studying Indian and Tibetan traditions, and obviously I was more interested in the ones that would include magical elements such as yoga and tantra, and also in Renaissance Latin books, which is something that I did my master's thesis on. And then, when I was approaching the end of my master's, speaking of YouTube, I found out a YouTube video where that it featured Jenny Butler. She's now a friend of mine, fun enough. And she was showcasing her PhD, and she was doing PhD on witchcraft and paganism in Ireland. And I thought, oh, wow, she's doing a PhD on that. So it's possible. So in Italy, it wasn't possible. So when you live in a country where something doesn't happen, you sort of assume that it's not really a thing. So when I realized there were other countries where this type of study were done academically, then I thought, oh, I want to try and do that. And so that's why I moved to the UK. It's not Ireland, but close enough. And so, yeah, I did my PhD in religious studies, and more specifically anthropology of religion, and more specifically in Italian witchcraft and shamanism. And I've published a book on that with Brill. So it is an academic book. It's a peer-reviewed academic book, and recently I've also published. I've co-edited with Dr. Susan Owen a book called "Pagan Religions in 5 Minutes." That's also another peer-reviewed academic book. But I'm now also starting to publish with commercial publishers. I have a contract with Wiser, so I will be publishing a book on the left-hand path, which is based on an online course that I delivered last year, and it is available on my website, drangelapuca.com, if people want to take it. I decided to turn it into a book, and so that should hopefully, fingers crossed, be published next year.
Wonderful. So wait, there was a bit of a jump there, because like, how did it get? I'm just curious, if you don't mind me asking, how did it get from studying like just witchcraft to like writing a book about the left-hand path? Who were some of your inspirations for that, or who did you take inspiration from in order to actually write a book about that?
It was progressive, because when I started my YouTube channel, I started covering at first things that I was studying for my PhD, and that would or wouldn't end up in my thesis. I think in America you call it this dissertation, but in the UK they call dissertation the undergraduate ones. So for my so I started making videos based on the things that I was researching at the moment, and then I started making videos on all sorts of esoteric topics that interest me at the time. And I made a video on the left-hand path, and it was really popular, and it is still one of the most popular videos on my YouTube channel, Angela Symposium. I started making more videos on topics within the left-hand path esoteric umbrella, and covering different traditions like Telema or Telema, the Typhonian tradition, Dragon Rouge, different forms of Satanism, demonology, and all that stuff. So given that I started researching for these YouTube videos, very often when I do research for a video, I have a lot of research material that doesn't end up in the video, but I see, and I also have the books and the papers that I read. So I thought, actually, all this material that I have from my research, I could use it to elaborate further into lectures. So I started designing this left-hand path online course, covering all the topics. There's also like demonolatry and demonology, and different forms of Satanism, Luciferianism, also sex magic, BDSM, and kink in magic practices. So it covers all sorts, also the female deities, shadow work. So and then once I have completed the course, I thought, wow, I have a lot of material, and this could actually be a book. This is worth becoming a book. So that's how it happened.
That's amazing, because like, I actually think, from my own conjecture, the left-hand path, the studies and the practice of the left-hand path suffer from bad publicity. Everybody thinks if you're a practitioner for a left-hand path, you're a horrible person. But quite frankly, I have met some of the nicest people. They're the most genuine people on the planet. Shout out to people like Shea Belay and Michael Ford, kindest people in the planet. And just for the education of the public, I'd like to ask you, maybe you can share, since it suffers from such a negative image, what are some of the benefits of studying that? Because if you were able to write a book about it, it means that there's something beautiful about it. And we want to bring to light to our listeners, like, what are the beautiful sides of understanding and studying and even practicing things of the left-hand path?
I think that it's interesting because it's possible that there are some traditions that would follow from a scholarly perspective under the left-hand path umbrella that they might not consider themselves as left-hand path because practitioners are notoriously not particularly accurate when it comes to describing their own practices, and that's why it's interesting to have academics studying them. And that's why in anthropology we have something called the emic versus the ethic perspective. The emic perspective is how practitioners would define themselves, and the ethic perspective, which is not ethic, it's ethic without the H, is how a scholar would define the practice, so that you have both perspectives, and it kind of helps to have a better overview of whatever it is that you're researching. But practitioners are notoriously inaccurate when it comes to defining their practice, just because when a practitioner defines their practice, it's not about being accurate, which is the main focus of an academic. It is about what they want to convey to the person they are speaking with, the kind of image they want to portray. It's more about that than about being accurate with the definitions, which is the obsession of academics instead. So I think the left-hand path is interesting because it is antinomian. There are some elements that identify a tradition as being left-hand path. So you have the fact that there isn't really a structure. I mean, there are cases where there are some orders, but the primary goal is self-deification. So the idea of becoming a living God in a way. And also the fact that it is antinomian, which means that it is against following dogmatic rules. And also there's this appraisal of the here and now, and there isn't really a sense of behaving in a certain way for an afterlife. It is about appreciating the here and now. It is also seeing the sacred in the body and what you can do with your body, as opposed to seeing it as something that you need to deny or transcend in order to find your spiritual dimension. So I think what is interesting about the left-hand path is the fact that it immerses you into the body, into the here and now, and also into the shadow aspects of yourself, not because it's evil, but because it sees the source of your own power in that shadow, and that connecting with that shadow actually helps you to shine brighter. So I think that it's very interesting, and also there are also fascinating traditions that fall under the umbrella that I think are really worth studying, and perhaps especially because it has a bad reputation, people should study it more. Every time that something has a bad reputation, I think it deserves more analysis, because very often people stop at surface level.
Exactly, because the term shadow work nowadays is getting a lot of traction, but sometimes it's coming out of the mouth of the wrong people. I think some people have twisted the meaning of shadow work into their own narrative, when in fact it's about incorporating all aspects of yourself, even the side that you've been repressing. Because how can you be a full human being if you don't incorporate all of it, the good and the evil, the light, the dark? You're not complete. And I wanted to ask you, just from your observation lately, since a lot of people, everybody from these yogis and these light workers have been using the word shadow work, what can you say about this term? Because I know some people don't have the right idea of it. They treat the shadow like something that needs to be forgiven. While personally, as a person who does my own study of shadow work, I treat my shadow as something that needs to be celebrated. So what can you say about this burst of awareness towards that term shadow work lately? I mean, what's your take on it?
I think that maybe the shadow work has become more popular as a part of a wave in the witchcraft community, because I think that there was a phase in the witchcraft community where everybody was love and light.
Yeah.
And then there was a kind of an acknowledgement that love and light actually doesn't quite cut it, because it's not possible to be love and light, and it can be actually very toxic.
Mm-hmm.
And so you've had this wave of hex positivity, or as some people on social media have called it. And people trying to sort of reconnect with it and saying, oh, actually the weekend read doesn't make sense, and these ethical stances on are not nuanced enough. And I think as part of that trend towards reconnecting with darker aspects of ourselves, and realizing that you cannot be love and light, and trying to work away from that paradigm, I think that shadow work is a part of that wave in the witchcraft community. And as you said, a lot of people interpret it in sometimes completely different ways, but shadow work is a concept that has been reinterpreted by the magic practicing community, but derives from Carl Gustav Jung, and the idea that everybody has a shadow, which are these repressed, hidden aspects of ourselves. And it is all part of the process of individuation in Carl Gustav Jung. So it's about integrating yourself into the wholeness that you are. So shadow work would be really part of that. It's part of collecting all the aspects of yourself that you have put into the shadow because you don't like them, because they make you feel uncomfortable, because they are connected to trauma, and in a way recollecting all those bits so that you can be whole again.
That's amazing.
I think a lot of it, what's going on so far, is the community is taking little nibbles at shadow work. They'll say like, well, I'm always very positive, but you don't want to see my shadow. But they're thinking of like, Arnold Schwarzenegger in the leather jacket with the dark shades at night because he's just extra badass. So they're thinking of the shadow as the part of you that's super badass and scary, but they don't understand that there is so much more, and it gets way worse than that. Because that they have that image on their memes, but they don't understand. It's like what they're not connecting is that, like, well, yes, that's actually a photograph of a robot that's a soulless killing machine, specifically to do that and nothing else. And they're not quite accepting the entire shadow, because that's all the things that literally you can't accept about yourself. That's why it's in the shadows. So it would be almost like if you wanted to take a movie image, the little guy Gollum from the Lord of the Rings, that sneaks up on people and strangles them in their sleep. That's part of your shadow too. It's all the worst things that you can think of, especially the things that you hate the most. Those are the things that you put in your shadow. This is why we see in the US, we see statesmen, politicians, that they're up there saying, I'm going to pitch this family values bill. We're going to bring back family values to America. And then the next week, they get busted for soliciting minors for sex. True story, just happened.
It happens more often than not. Dr. Puca, I have a question before I forget. It's just slipping my mind. I appreciate the fact that you are very academic in your approach, but I also see that there's a practical aspect to what you're doing. Some person can literally just study everything about occultism but never even touch it. But I wanted to ask you from the top of your head, since you have studied the left-hand path, you have studied things like that, and you're even coming out with a book of it. And Wade and I were just discussing it before you got here. From a practitioner's perspective, what would you say is one or more of the most dangerous practices that you've studied or observed, that like, whoa, that's something that you might not want to touch? Because I've asked other scholars about this and I haven't been given a direct answer, but I'd love to take your take on it. That like, what would you say would be like a handle with care kind of practice out there?
So given that I do anthropology of religion and I do participant observation, I obviously I have a lot of contact with practitioners, and I also participate in various rituals. So that's what participant observation is. So based on what I've seen on field work and my assessment, I'd say that there isn't really one practice that is most dangerous. What is most dangerous is for a practitioner to approach a practice they're not ready for. Because I think any practice or any entity can be approached in a way that makes it safer if the person is ready enough. It's a bit like saying, is there a sport that is that is more dangerous? I think that there are type of sports that are more dangerous than others, but if you have enough preparation, then you can still do them safely enough. So um, yeah, I don't think that there are. I'd say that probably working with demons is more dangerous than working with other entities, but it is something that practitioners can make safer. I think that in a way, all forms of there isn't a form of magic that is 100% safe, especially when it is effective. I think that they can all pose some perhaps different types of risks. But there are some, especially when you work with entities that are a bit more connected with telluric, with the chthonic world, with the material world that have there are some entities that have much of a hold on the physical world and other entities that have less of a hold on the physical world. I think that the former type tends to be more dangerous and more difficult to deal with. But I would still say that the most dangerous thing is a practitioner trying to do something they're not ready for.
Very true. I mean, you're your own biohazard at times, which is going to bring me to the next segment of our show, which is the current event segment. Now, one thing I'd like to say before we get there, I wanted to say thank you. Why do I say thank you? I say thank you to people like you, to like people like Lon, people like Marco Visconti or Foolish Fish, because during the pandemic, this disease in modern occultism came out for a while, which was called witch talk. And all these people who exactly did not know what they were doing were spreading out all this nonsense. And basically, it was a huge disinformation campaign about what magic is, how it works, what you can expect from it. And then, as a result of that, as a pushback, I noticed that more and more genuine people who had genuine practices started releasing content to educate the public and say, actually, no, this is what it's about. And your channel was a prime example of that. That like all of the stuff that you released was really well curated, researched, and it was like, okay, this is what I'm looking for. But with that, I wanted to ask you, Dr. Puca, I want to take your own observation, how you feel occultism and magic is. Is it getting better? Is it getting worse? Do you think we're going to a dark age, or are we about to hit a renaissance? What's your forecast and observation of the field as a whole?
In terms of practitioners or in terms of the academic field?
I'd like to say more of the practitioner aspect. Are we going to be having more genuine practitioners, or are we going to be hoarded by witch talkers in the next 20 years?
I think that there are always going to be both sides. I think it is part of there are positive sides to the internet and there are negatives. I think that the problem, more than being people spreading the misinformation, are the algorithms of social media that really push things that will provoke a negative feeling or a sense of scandal or surprise or shock. So there is more and more a push towards things that are, shocking and bombastic. And that's not going to be the thorough, complex academic analysis, is it? So I think that part of the reason why there's misinformation is the fact that social media tends to push that kind of content more, and so more people tend to be inclined to produce that kind of content because it gets views and it gets them attention and perhaps even money. So I'm hoping that over time people will start appreciating more the sources behind people's information and look at, when somebody says something, okay, what are their sources? Are they open with what their sources are. Like, for instance, in my case, on my YouTube channel, I always have a list of my references. So if you want to know where the information from my video came from, you can just look at the info box and check my references, check my sources. So I would always be skeptical of something that doesn't have a source. And obviously, if you're a practitioner and you're sharing your own experience, then you are the source of that information, and that is fine as long as it is clarified. But the misinformation that you talk about tends to be not about I've had this experience and this happened. It tends to be more like, oh, this is how it is. This is how this tradition is. This is what the holy guardian angel is. This. So they try to actually educate, but the information is wrong. So when the content is educational and it's not about somebody's own experience, then if they don't provide sources, then I'm skeptical. That's what I think. I think there is more of a trend towards a more scholarly approach. I don't know if it is because that's the circle that I'm in, and so my social media feeds me more content that is similar to mine. But this is what seems to me to be the case. I'm not sure, whether the misinformation will still be more in terms of numbers compared to the good education, but we will do the best we can to fight that with proper education. What I can see in terms of trends in among practitioners is more of leaning more towards folk practices and practices of their ancestors, as opposed to universalizing types of practices. I think that there was a trend for decades where practitioners wanted practices that were universalizable, which means that whether you are from Italy or from France or from the US, you can practice that tradition and you're gonna get the same results. You can do that practice and you're supposed to get the same exact results. And that's a transcultural, universalizable type of practice. Whereas folk magic practices tend to be more, which are also called in academic literature indigenous religions or indigenous practices, which is not the same as indigenous people, by the way. I have a video on that, on the fact that indigenous religions and indigenous people are not the same thing. So these kind of practices that have that indigeneity component to them are practices that are rooted in the culture they belong to. They are rooted in a specific land, and they're not universalizable, because if you do them in Italy or in the UK, it's gonna matter. It's not gonna be the same. You're not going to have the same results. So I think that there is. It seems to me like there is more of a trend towards folk practices and less towards universalizable type of practices. What do you think about that? Do you
Well,
see that too?
there was a trend in the early 90s, 2000, that they were trying to exactly, like they were trying, instead of making it like the lesser ritual of the pentagram, they would make it just like this own generalized version that anybody can do, and it takes away the personality of it. But I don't think that trend really survived for too long, because at the end of the day, the indigenous cultural identity is still part of the person. So like for me, I live in the Philippines, so if you ask me, a form of Filipino ceremonial magic, even if we're doing the LBRP, but we're doing it in Filipino and calling upon Filipino deities or spirits, would be more suited for the people than just something, that takes away the individuality of it. Because I did wanted to bring up something. I loved your video about practical war magic, and I wanted to ask you about that. As in, do you predict that there will be an increase in magical involvement in war and in politics in the next couple of years? Because this has always been kind of like a secret weapon of rulers. I mean, like, if I'm not mistaken, John Dee was a consultant to one of the queens of England, and people always had, even the Nazis, got to be damned with them, were into the occult. So do you think that in the next coming years, magic, occultism will play a bigger role in politics and in warfare?
I think it's always played a big role in politics and warfare. I can't really think of a moment in history where Well, obviously, I haven't checked the documents, the historical documents for every single war and every single time in history. So you can, an academic can never ask such a general question. But for the ones that I have looked into, it seems like very often, if not always, there are some form of esoteric practices around war and around politics. It's incredibly common. It's I'm not even sure if it is a secret. I mean, it seems to be a secret, but in Italian we have or maybe it's in Naples that we have a term that which is il segreto di Pulcinella, which is the secret of this sort of clownish figure. So it's like the secret of a clown, which means it's not a secret. It's something that is hidden in plain sight. I've also seen at conference of the European Society for the Study of Western Esotericism. There was 2 years ago at the University of Malmo, that there was a Ukrainian scholar that was talking about the different ritualistic practices that in Ukraine they were doing, and also in Russia. So she was talking about these curse songs that women were doing, and there was one that was really impressive that she showed us during the paper. And also how in Russia they were also doing similar practices, but they were using more of a Christian framework, whereas in Ukraine they were using more folk magic practices. So I think that magic and esoteric practices have always been incredibly present in the fabric of our society and in our communities. So I think when there is a heightened activity from a geopolitical point of view, it's likely there's going to be heightened activity also from an esoteric point of view.
So are you saying, Doctor, that the presence of a magical element could make or break a war or even topple a government?
It's difficult to say because magic is an influence, right? It is something that makes like something less likely to happen, more likely to happen. So I don't think that magic is omnipotent. If somebody structures magic properly, if they have enough help and they're very strategic about they go about their magic, then probably that could happen. And yes, as you said, I would definitely recommend people to watch my practical war magic video, because I explain this the process of creating an effective ritual in much more details. But potentially yes, but the more something is unlikely to happen naturally, the more difficult it is to achieve it with magic. You can there are ways to increase the likelihood, but you kind of have to see as a scale. So it's like magic is a type of influence. So if your objective is here and the type it's wrong. Okay, if my objective is here and I'm here and the type of energy that I can raise from my magic is this amount, I'm not gonna get here, am I? So you've got to do something to increase you can call it efficacy, power, energy of your ritual, and that can be done by targeting things very precisely, very accurately. So being strategic with the intent of the magic, also working with groups, doing group activities that are all focused on the same thing, that also can get you higher up. Also doing stepwise goals. Instead of having a goal that is this high, you can split that goal into micro steps that will still lead you there. Like, if you are doing a ritual to become an engineer and you are an high school kid, you're not gonna succeed in your ritual, but you might do a stepwise strategic plan so that you get you finish your degree with your diploma with the best degrees and the best opportunities to get to the best college that will get you to become to get the engineering position that you're dream for. So if you divide it in steps that will get you from the point where you're now to the point where you want to be, that's also a way of increasing the likelihood of a ritual to be effective.
That's actually a very good approach of doing that, especially if you're trying
There's
to.
also an indirect methods too. Say, for example, if this one political figure is powerful because he has access to, say, a mine where he mines weapons grade polonium or whatever, and then you're like, well, okay, I can't get this guy directly. I can collapse this mine,
Yes,
and that
that could
cuts
be.
out his so that way he doesn't have that source. So you're not even attacking him directly, but you can like tap into their source of power and kind of degrade that, and it makes them weaker, and it brings that target up here all the way down here to where it's within
Yeah.
reach.
Yes, exactly. And also, I'd say it would be good to ask yourself the question, if a person has power and you don't want them to have power, what would decrease massively their power? And of the things that would decrease their power, what's the most likely to happen? So if, for instance, their power is in the money and there is already a decline in sales of a specific thing, perhaps you could help that even more, right? Because
Exactly.
you're already entering a trend that is happening and you're boosting it. So so I think that when it comes to changing political situations, it's obviously very difficult to be effective, but it can be done being very strategic and working together. Like I really admire of all the political war magic, my hero is the Unfortunate.
Mhm.
And I always recommend reading The Magical Battle of Britain because she's a hero. I mean, she kind of every week she would send these newsletters with rituals and visualizations to do to protect Britain from the Nazi invasion. And I don't know. I just thought that what she did was really impressive, even
That
from a
was a
human point of view.
that was an excellent book.
Yeah.
There was actually another one that was written about the folk witches, the regular traditional witchcraft covens, what they were doing during the Battle of Britain.
You mean
There
the
was a lot of
Operation Cone of Power?
what's that?
Do you mean the Operation Cone of Power, the one allegedly done by Gerald Gardner and other Wiccan practitioners?
Yes.
Mm.
Yeah, I had read. I can't think of the title of it right now, but I had read a book about that, about how they had also coordinated their efforts. So even if it's not so much like the leadership of both sides of a war are going to be are actively participating in magic or enlisting the aid of magicians, they're going to have a lot of people in both countries that are doing war magic.
Yeah, that's why it seems like another good strategy would be protection. So if attacking or deposing somebody might be too difficult, then you could target the protection of something. That could also be a way of going about it.
Exactly. Make them walk uphill all the way.
Exactly. I have another question, Dr. Puka, if you don't mind me asking. Due to the amazing contributions people like you and Dr. Sledge and even Dr. Stephen Skinner have made to the academic aspect of magic, do you feel that we are closer to be taken more seriously by the mainstream and by the academe and not be considered like fringe or new age? Or do you still think that the mainstream media and academe still think they're still too constipated to accept that we are here and we're here to stay? What do you think about that?
I think it depends because in religious studies, in the academic field of religious studies, I think that esoteric practitioners are taken very seriously, and the study of esotericism is now established. It's still quite new. It was established around the 90s with figures like Antoine Fevre and Wouter Hanegraaff, who's still at the University of Amsterdam. But I think in academia, and especially in religious studies, yes, obviously these practices are taken as seriously as other religious practices within religious studies. Whereas in the wider academic community, it's still a bit complicated and it's a bit tricky. And if you are an academic and you are a practitioner, you better be quiet about it, because otherwise it's really difficult to get funding to research esotericism, but it's even more challenging if you are open about being a practitioner. So I think there is still a lot to be done, but I really admire all of my colleagues that are putting in the work in universities with publications, with peer-reviewed publications, because it's really difficult to publish something academically, and you need to do a lot of research and go through a lot of hoops, and you don't get any money out for it. But it is what changes really the scientific body around it, and makes a difference. So I really admire all of my colleagues for doing that. Sometimes I speak with colleagues that say, "Oh, you have like hundreds of thousands of people following you, and I have like 3 students in my class." And I say, "Well, the impact that you have on those 3 students and the impact that your research has, your research is the reason why I have the YouTube channel, because I try to base my content on academic scholarship. So if you were not doing the work that you're doing, I couldn't expose it to the public." So another reason why I wanted to have my channel, and I'm glad that people watch it, is so that I can showcase colleagues' work, because otherwise, people wouldn't even know. I think even people that are interested in esotericism and are practitioners, they often have no idea of the academic side of the topic they're interested in, that there even is, that there are papers and research and studies on that topic. So I hope to make that more visible, because they deserve it.
I totally agree with you on that, and I appreciate that, because we're at a time now where a lot of us practitioners, scholars, community leaders, we're actually, there's a lot of collaboration going on nowadays. Unlike 10 years ago, where everybody was like, "No, this is mine, leave me alone. I'm published, don't talk to me," and you're not. But I'm happy to see nowadays that the spirit of really camaraderie is there, that like, I want to feature you to help you. At the same time, maybe one day down the line, you might want to feature me or talk with me or write a book with me. But it's really an energy of support, because there may have been someone who'd never heard of Dr. Angela Puca in my channel, but now because of that, now they know her. And then they're going to find her page, and it's a treasure trove of information, and they're going to grow. Because this is the one thing I wanted to ask you too, when it comes to the academic side of things. And I'd love your input on this. There's a term going around amongst practitioners and scholars called UPG, unverified personal gnosis. All right. And there's a lot of books out there. I'm not telling you, I'm sure you know what that means. I'm talking to the audience. And the question I wanted to ask you is, when is something considered UPG or not? Because my understanding is, at one time or another, everything was UPG. Everything started from a source and it wasn't verified. But how does it become something that is, okay, established, we're going to practice this, we're going to give this a try, versus it's the mad ramblings of some person on the top of a mountain? What would your take be on that?
So are you saying, when does something stop? When does something stop being UPG and becomes established?
Yes, exactly.
It's a difficult question to answer, because the concept of UPG is very recent, and it's not something that has really any academic research on. I'm familiar with what it is, so I only have speculations. I don't really have proper data or studies, because it hasn't been researched yet, to my knowledge. So the concept, from what I understand it, unverified personal gnosis is when somebody has some sort of revelation and a higher type of understanding that is totally personal and is not verified by external sources. So I think that this concept didn't quite exist in the past. So I don't think that you can say, when do you move from UPG to non-UPG, because I don't think that this concept, at least to my knowledge, I don't know, it's just a discourse that is very modern and very contemporary. It's difficult to apply it to the past, but I think in the past the concept was, well, again, it depends massively on the tradition. I suppose that gnosis is something that in a way is always personal. I think that people that have formulated the concept of UPG, what they mean is that they have a personal experience that doesn't need validation from books or from other people. And as I said, this is a very recent concept. It's not something that you can compare to the way that gnosis was described in ancient texts,
Agreed.
because I suppose that that was also a personal thing, but the concept of verification or verifying it via text or other people's validation is not something that was really there. So you don't really have a comparison because it's a completely new concept.
I'm not really for it personally because I have always believed in the subjectivity of magic. That I've always believed magic is subjective. There are ways of doing things, but your experience is your experience. But I was asking you as an academic because it has been thrown at me more than once. And, oh, don't read that book. That's just a pure UPG. And from the point of view, I'm saying, but what gives you the right to say that? Wasn't everything at one point UPG or not? So I just wanted to get your 2 cents on that, and I appreciate.
Oh, I think I see what you mean. I think that what they mean in that sense is that perhaps it's just somebody's opinion and it's not rooted in any tradition and it's not rooted in any history and it's not rooted in any sources. So I think that's what they mean. And so in that sense, something not being UPG would be something that is rooted in tradition, that is rooted in text, that is rooted in sources. So I think that's what they mean. Something that is just purely the musings of a specific practitioner and not part of a tradition or built on, because there are new traditions that are born all the time, and even the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn was born at some point, but the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, just as Wicca and any other tradition, were sort of born from something that came before them. So I think that when people say, oh, this is just UPG, they mean that it's not really rooted in anything or a development from something specific, a specific tradition, text, or whatever, but it is just purely the musings of that specific person and their own construction.
Well, that teaches us a lot. So anyhow, now we're going to go to the occult segment of the show, occult X segment of the show, where this is where our guest can teach us anything she'd like. I'm hoping she has something amazing, ready for us. If you want to give us like a technique on protection or war magic or politic magic, I'd be really honored to have that. You're a treasure trove of information. So we'd like to give you the floor right now, Dr. Puca. Remember, Occult X is us learning directly from our guests. We really want to learn something from you today. So what have you got for us, Doctor?
I wonder whether I have a reply to that earlier in the part on war magic. So I'd say that if practitioners want to be more effective with their magic, to be strategic about it. And perhaps if they want to help the world situation, it would be a good idea to assess the likelihood of something to happen. So it's like, if I want to achieve this goal, what's the most likely way in the physical world and within the circumstances for it to happen, and then have a strategy towards that goal, and trying to increase the energy and the effectiveness of the magic by using a stepwise approach, and working in group settings with as many people as you can, and always take into consideration the fact that the more unlikely something is to happen, the more your magic needs to be powerful. I'm not sure how I feel about the concept of energy, but if it is more understandable, I can say the more energy you need to raise in order for that to happen. So and also perhaps trying to do protection, because that's something that the unfortunate did in the Second World War.
Let's just do a bit of an example. Let's say you want to do something to find a job. How would, using your approach and your framework of being strategic about it, what would you do in order to increase the odds of you getting that job from your strategic magic approach?
It depends on the job. It depends on you. In order to be strategic about it, you need to have information about who you are, what are your credentials, your qualifications, and what is the job you're applying for. Because if you have If you don't have a university degree and you want to become a university professor, then you know, the strategic way would be to start getting degrees and the PhD to begin with. So I think that it is about really understanding the situation that you're dealing with, and your positionality as well. So where are you positioned in relation to the goal? And based on all the things that you have, what's the likelihood of you going from point A, where you are, to point B, where you want to be, with your magical ritual? So that's why I say, I suppose my educational contribution would be to be strategic about magic practice to make it effective.
And you mentioned protection, because one thing I've also observed is that sometimes when you're trying to do something, even for yourself, some people would want to poison it or even jinx it in a way. What would you recommend as a simple yet effective form of protection to make sure that your objectives aren't being poisoned?
Say it again, sorry.
Okay, because like example, let's say I want a job, but somebody doesn't want me to have that job, so they send negative energy to it. I end up getting jinxed. So what would you say would be a very simple way for me to protect what I'm trying to do from the bad energy of other people?
I think that also depends. It depends on, like for instance, I'm an Italian, so I would, if I were you, I would use one of the malocchio or anti-malocchio techniques that are part of Italian folk magic. But you being a Filipino might have a different way of going about it. So I think it depends. I don't think that it's easy to universalize magic practices. It's easier to universalize the strategy, but then the application needs to be tailored on your situation, on where you are, and exactly what is you're trying to protect from. I don't think there is one thing that I say, oh, use a black bean and that's going to be the most effective thing. I think that everything needs to be contextualized. So that would be another educational nugget from me on the topic, that besides being strategic, I think it's important to contextualize. We've been used to that universalizable approach, saying, oh, this thing is going to work the best for everybody, and this is the most effective, this is the most powerful. But I personally don't think that's true. I don't think there is one thing that is the most powerful or the most effective. I think this is completely contextual. It depends on the situation, it depends on the person, it depends exactly on the need and exactly on what is that you are trying to get protection from.
Perfect. I mean, that's perfect for the audience. They need to know these details. Nobody yet has told our audience and our viewers that be strategic with your magic. You basically laid out to them a strategic plan of something they could template if they tweak with what you said. So we really appreciate you for this. Wade, is there anything else you want to ask or share with Dr. Puca before we let her plug herself?
Oh, I'm good. I like the idea that was just put out there, that using the strategic application of your own culture is to say, well, okay, well, if we're trying to do this job and someone's working against us, using, in Italy, they would use the anti-malocchio magic, but every culture has something that's like that. Just find your own. But it's the same intent, just a different application.
Very true.
I like that.
Anyhow, Doctor, so tell us more about what you have coming up. Where can we find you? Are you planning to do some sort of world tour to train people? If ever you want to come to the Philippines, you're welcome to. I'll show you around. I'd love to show you this place. But what can we expect from the illustrious Dr. Puca? I mean, where can we follow you and support your work?
So you can find me on all social media platforms as Dr. Angela Puca and or as Angela Symposium. My main and preferred social media is my YouTube channel. I'm also quite active on Instagram and on TikTok. My website is drangelapuca.com, so people can find everything there, my services. I have tutoring sessions and the Left Hand Path online course, and also to sign up for my newsletter, which is also on my website, so that you are up to date with everything that is going on with me. And if people want to support my work, I would really appreciate if they did so. All of my social media platforms have all the links to my Patreon, PayPal, Coffee, Yeah, if people want to support my work and the academic study of Stoicism, it's always a pleasure, and be very happy for them to support me.
And when's your Left Hand Path book coming out from Wiser?
Hopefully next autumn. I mean, not this year. Autumn 2026.
So,
Yes,
so
2026.
we should wait for the announcement for that, but I'd be more than happy to purchase a copy just to support you. I mean, like I said, guys, if you haven't, visit Dr. Puca's YouTube channel. I mean, literally speaking, you'll have content for days to learn from this wonderful lady. Her information is amazing. It's well curated. It's educational, and it's not boring. Unfortunately, some people who talk about the topic can be really boring, but Dr. Puca is not one of them. So with that being said and done, thank you so much, Dr. Puca, for honoring us with your presence. We really support you and expect this to be uploaded in days to come. Please don't leave. We're just going to end the show. Then Wade and I will personally thank you. Have a wonderful day, Dr. Puca. Thank you. Everybody
Thank you
on
very much
Multicast
for
TV,
letting me know.
see us next week because I think we have Naomi Ozaniek as our next guest. Good luck, everyone.